morning shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight with your award-winning host, Dale Davidson. Dale interviews fascinating guests from top-ranked celebrities to people just like you who have an important story to tell. For more than 15 years, Dale is broadcast every week from the fabulous Las Vegas Strip. He finds the people who really make Las Vegas a one-of-a-kind city and lets the world know just what's happening in this remarkable town. You'll discover why 50 million people visit the entertainment capital of the world every year. Stay tuned for another exciting episode of Las Vegas Tonight.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Each and every episode, we bring you fascinating guests from what I think is one of the most fascinating cities in America. And we've done it again. We have Karen Silva, who's a dear friend and a really fascinating woman. Karen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, we've been on broadcasts together before.
Yes.
On radio. You were hosting then, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. What was the show and what were you doing?
It was called Voice of Life, and it was a radio show just talking about life in Jesus Christ, and life for women in crisis pregnancies, and how to help them and help them to choose life.
And you have a really interesting and varied history in the pro-life movement and the crisis pregnancy movement, but there's obviously much more to you than that. Let's talk about your growing up years. You're a New England girl, right?
I am. I grew up in Maine. I'm a maniac.
A maniac!
It's not politically correct anymore. It's native Mainer, but I
native
like
Mainer. Okay, I like maniac better.
Right?
Yeah. What part? What part of the
Bangor?
Maine? In Bangor. I've been there. Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Lucky you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's really was a shipbuilding capital for a while. A lot of fishing boats and other boats were built there.
Right.
And now you migrated down to Boston. Is that right?
That's correct.
To go to school, or what were you doing there?
No, I kind of got tired of the slow life. I loved Maine. It's beautiful, and I just felt like I wanted a little something more, and had a lot of friends in Massachusetts, so I moved down there.
Yeah, yeah. And you were a nanny, right?
I was a nanny.
Tell me about being a nanny. What's that like? It seems so European somehow.
Right.
But this was an American family, right?
It was an American family, 2 teenage boys. And, you know, being a nanny is very interesting because you're kind of part of the family, but yet not really. And, but it's a great thing to be a part of a child's life and children's lives, and you know, just be able to help them out, help them to grow and learn the ropes of life and that kind of thing.
And you got to see some serious wealth, didn't you, working for this family? What was that like?
I did. It was a whole new world for me, and it was interesting to see just what money can buy, and people with money, how I'd have my little tiny budget, and the things that I thought were a huge treat, like you know, coffee out frequently was a big treat to me.
That's a big deal, yeah.
And you know, for them it was European vacations, you know, were their frequent big treat, that
this
kind of thing.
This year's yacht, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really different.
Yep.
Now, you got involved in the pro-life movement in Boston.
I did.
Now, tell me about that. How did you do that? Why did you do it? How long were you involved?
Okay.
Answer any of those questions.
Any of
I throw them all out at once.
Right. Well, I was 38 years old, and I became a Christian. I just had spent a lot of years living a very wild lifestyle, and then had some good friends who actually weren't Christians, but they just loved me and saw value in me and saw how I was trashing myself with alcohol and bad relationships, and kind of helped me move into serving. And I always had a heart for service. My dad had that, and I got that from him. So then I just really found my purpose in life, which was to help children grow up in safe and solid homes, and that kind of guided me into different places of volunteering. And then I became a Christian when I was 38, and gave my life to Christ. Just said, I'm following you, and you know, he became my guide and my focus. And I was sitting in church one day, and this pregnancy center in Boston came in and they shared what they did, that they helped women in crisis pregnancy centers with free services, ultrasound and pregnancy tests and options counseling and education. And I couldn't stop crying. And I went down to the director after the service and I said, I would love to volunteer there.
Yeah. Why were you so moved?
Because I had personally had abortions, and I just felt like I didn't realize, especially until that moment, how much I was still in pain from that decision. You know, it was
That's pretty common, isn't it?
It's very common. Women who have abortions tend to bury it very deep, and sometimes, you know, I've seen women even in their 80s deal with it for the first time because it's such a traumatic experience, and it's such a decision that goes against, you know, women were made to bear children, and then we become pregnant, and then we choose to terminate the pregnancy, and it hurts. It hurts deeply. And so, you know, I knew I was in a lot of emotional pain, but didn't realize that that was it. And that's
in that moment is when it hit you.
In that moment, it really hit me. And so when I was talking to the director of the pregnancy center, I was sobbing, you know, and she's kind of, you know, not very nice, but kind of looking at me. But I was a wreck, you know, barely communicate. But I just said, I want to help here. And so she handed me an application. And on that application, I had to share my relationship history, my pregnancy history, sexual history, all of that.
Wow.
And so I filled that out, and I had to fax that in, and someone from the center called me to set up an interview for me to be a volunteer there. And before I went for that interview, I was panicking, and I called a friend. I'm like, they have my application, and they're laughing at me, saying, how can this woman help? We're Christian here, we're pro-life, and, you know, look at this, you know, look what she's done in her life. And my friend just didn't quite know what to say, but she said, Karen, I really don't think that's what's going on over there. So I went for my interview, and I sat down with this lovely woman, and before we even really talked, she looked at me and she said, we can really use you here. And that was such an amazing, defining, healing moment where I thought, oh my gosh, God can use my sin, my pain, my regret, all of that to help others to not make that same choice.
And this is also a common misperception that even though you were a Christian at the time, that Christians are going to be judgmental. That Christians are going to say, "Ooh, you know, stay away from this person," and yet, especially people who haven't come to Christ don't understand that their sins are covered by Christ's blood. I mean, you know, we are all forgiven, and that's what you were waiting to hear. And through another person, you had a full understanding, really, of what God's grace is. Huh?
Exactly, exactly. And for myself and a lot of women who've had abortions, they feel like it's the unforgivable sin, you know, which of course isn't true. And Jesus died on the cross for that and many other sins, but it's just, it runs deep. So,
oh, sure. And they say that in any given Christian denomination, any church, you can look out and somewhere around 40% of the women sitting in that church have had abortions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So it isn't like it's not known. Everybody thinks it's a secret they only share, you know, with very few people, if anybody.
Right.
And yet, you know, this is an outlet. So aside from saving babies, which is what you've done for years, you're really saving women, you know.
Exactly.
You're helping in God's salvation to make that a real thing. So you have had an opportunity to return that favor?
Yes, absolutely, many times, which is such an amazing blessing.
And how long did you work in the ministry in Boston?
You know, I lose track of time. I would say it was about, I worked in one ministry for a while. I was answering the hotline, and then I got involved in another one, probably a total of 5 years at both. And at the second one, I wanted to counsel in person. And so I was in training to do that, and ended up being the assistant to the president as a volunteer, and then ended up getting a job there.
Oh,
and
okay.
So God blessed me with being able to work in the arena
and
where I'm most passionate
this story's
about.
been repeated here in Las Vegas, too,
Exactly,
hasn't it?
exactly.
You started as a volunteer at the Crisis Pregnancy Center here?
I did, yes.
And you ended up being the director.
I did, yes. Which is you know, pretty amazing. You think about there's 2 centers in Vegas. It's my passion. I come here and I end up working for one of them.
Yeah,
you know?
one of the busiest in the country.
Yes.
Yeah. For those who don't really know what a crisis pregnancy center is, they've maybe never heard the phrase, our viewers have never heard the phrase, you outline some of the things that you do for women, but you know, what is your overarching vision? You know, what are you trying to accomplish when a woman walks in and she doesn't know whether she's pregnant or not? Isn't that often the case? And then so from that point forward, what is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish with that woman?
Well, first and foremost, sharing the gospel with her, because if a woman doesn't have Jesus, she's going to hell. If she doesn't have Jesus, she doesn't have the Holy Spirit to help her to make the choices that are right and best for her. And a lot of times women come in just mired in circumstances and bad relationships and fear of telling their parents, all of that stuff. And so at the Crisis Pregnancy Centers, we're there to help them to know God's love and that He is there with them, and that you know, there's help. That you know, a lot of women aren't thinking about, is it a baby or not. Like, I've sat with women for an hour in a counseling room and just talked about their options. You know, we educate on all the options and certainly the risks of abortion. And you know, I've seen women just can't get over, oh, I just can't tell my parents, or whatever it is for them.
Or my boyfriend doesn't want to hear, or my husband, or whatever.
Right. You know, he's out in the waiting room and he doesn't want this baby and all of that stuff. And and then, you know, I've gone into the ultrasound with that very same client, and she just sees that baby on the ultrasound, hears the heartbeat, and all of a sudden it goes from being a problem and circumstances to it being a life. And she's seeing that, you know, no one's telling her, she's seeing it, it's real. And, you know, many
that's been
women,
a real game changer, hasn't it?
It really has.
How many would you say who come in with abortion in mind change their minds when they see the baby in 4D, isn't that what they call it?
Right. Yeah, we, you know, state-of-the-art ultrasound is amazing. It looks like you can touch the baby. And you know, I would say it's probably about 70% nationwide is what I hear, the statistic. And you know, it's the ultrasound, and I think it's a lot of times we get into situations in our life, we all do it, and we're afraid, and we don't stop. We just keep going, and like, we'll either deal with that later, or we're just gonna stuff it and go make quick decisions. And I think part of it too is just having them sit down with someone who cares about their situation.
This may be the first person, you know, who's really going to be listening and talking about, what do you want, right? And what do you think is the right thing to do? And they're not hearing that at home or wherever they happen to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. And some of these are pretty young girls, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah, we've seen them as young as 12.
Wow. Now, what do you think about parental notification? That became a bill here in Nevada, and you know, an object of a great deal of discussion and controversy. And I gather they weren't looking even for parental permission, but for notification of minors' parents or legal guardians that an abortion is about to be performed. And it didn't get through the legislature this time around. Do you think there's a political solution to this one? I know you believe it's a matter of heart, you know, and I agree, but do you think there's you know, politics should play a role in this?
You know, I think it should. I don't think it's the answer. And you know, it's funny because you know, after I heard that, you know, that didn't pass, and you know, people were so upset, I just had this feeling like, you know what, I'm not sure it'll help. I'm not sure that's the solution to the problem. And I just thought, I wonder how many women will commit suicide. You know what I mean? How many women are going to even go more into being secretive about what they're doing? You know, so there's that side of it, but then there's also the side of, wow, I wonder what would have happened if I told my parents. You know what I mean? If I had to tell them, you know, my guess is that they would have supported me, you know.
And it might be different.
And it might be different.
Yeah.
So I can see both sides, you know.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it's certainly been a political issue for a long time, and it divides Christians, it divides you know, husbands and wives and, you know, brothers and sisters, and it's such a divisive issue. I don't know what the middle ground is. Perhaps there is one, you know, but let's explore that in our next segment. And I want to talk about hope too, if we can.
Great.
We'll be back with more with Karen Silva right after this. Hi, I'm Dale Davidson, host of Las Vegas Tonight. You know, radio has an enduring place in the heart of America. Sometimes it's music that can enliven your spirit or keep you company when you need some. More often for me, it's just been the right spoken word or two that can quiet my mind and soul. Radio brings me a reassuring word in the quiet of night or a welcoming voice early in the morning as I shake off the night's sleep and find my way into God's purpose for my day. And always, I find the best radio station is the one that brings me the best news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. My favorite radio station is KKVV in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's still right where it's been for years at 1060 on the AM dial, hovering over Sin City like a gospel airship, broadcasting the good news of the abounding love that Jesus Christ has for every single one of us. No matter who you are or where you live, you can receive God's Word via the KKVV Gospel Airship. Just go to kkvv.com and click on Listen Live. KKVV is using all the tools that God's provided them, like podcasting and video streaming and video on demand, to produce programs that lift up our fellow believers and save the lost. If you feel a calling to speak to others about Jesus Christ on your very own show, pick up the phone and call the station. They'll be happy to tell you how. Call KKVV today at 702-731-5588 or drop them an email at kkvvradio@hotmail.com. Please join me in becoming part of the KKVV family. You'll be glad you did. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson, with my friend, Karen Silva. We've been talking about some pro-life issues, and I want to continue that if we can for a little bit. We were talking about politics, and you were saying that you didn't really see that as the answer, and I tend to agree with you. I think it's an issue of the heart. Do you have hope? Do you believe that you're making inroads, you know, as an advocate for life over the years? Do you see good news?
I do see good news. I recently saw a statistic, and I believe it was there's 12% fewer abortions nationwide.
Sounds right. Yeah.
It's something like that. I'm bad with numbers, but
Yeah.
it's significant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I do believe it is. You know, the pregnancy centers help. You know, ultrasound has made, you know, what used to be seen as a blob of flesh has made it real.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. So I do believe there's a huge impact. I really do. And I see the ripple effect. You know, sometimes I'll see a client and, you know, we have little fetal models that, you know, show how
what a baby looks
what
like
a baby
at
looks
various
like.
stages, right?
And they're just so blown away, and then they want to take one of those with them, and they show their friends, and you know, so the education is getting out there. And I also think too, there's so many women and men who have had abortions that are suffering, and people are being much more open about it, and so people are also, that gets people thinking when they're about to make that decision.
Well, it's certainly a male issue too, and a lot of people don't think about that.
Right.
You know, before I was a Christian, I bought into that argument that it's a private issue. It's between a woman and her doctor. That's it. And you know, somebody fathered this child.
Exactly.
You know, and you know, if he's responsible, he wants to raise that child, I think, you know, and even if they're not married, he wants to be part of that child's life. He wants to, you know, help. Not all men, certainly, but many do, and they're not even cut in on the deal.
Right.
You know, they're not part of the decision-making process in many cases. And the other side of that too is, you know, that's a great cop-out for men when it comes down to it. It's like, hey, you helped, you were half of this deal. You know, you helped this baby come about, and now to say it's only between a woman and her doctor allows you to skate free. And,
right.
You know, you're as much a part of this as she is, it seems to me. So,
Absolutely.
you know, I think now, you know, men are having an opportunity to be responsible. That's the way to look at it, I think. And,
yes.
And did you see counseling was helpful with men?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting because, you know, most of our focus was on the woman,
Right.
you know, because she's ultimately, you know, the one who's going to have the abortion or not. And
Sure.
then we would bring, you know, we would find out what a client was thinking, you know, what the pressures were in her life, and we would often bring the men into the counseling rooms and communicate with both of them. And,
Right.
you know, we'd see the times where, you know, the woman wanted the abortion and the man didn't, and vice versa, and all of that. But what struck me most was that most often the couples hadn't communicated, because it was such a, it's a crisis. And when you're in crisis, it's very hard to talk openly and calmly and listen to the other person.
Right.
And there were times where maybe a client I would sit with would think that her boyfriend didn't want the baby, and then in the ultrasound they'd get talking and he'd be like, well, what made you think that? You know what I mean? But it was because she just was so afraid to talk to him and had this thought in her mind or whatever it was, you know.
Right.
So it's, to me, I saw that so often. It just came down to these two need to just really communicate.
But it certainly sounds as though you've had many successes, and when you've had a hard day, which many of them were, I'm sure, you had to be able to get in your car, drive home, and have a smile on your face if you saw one of those babies saved. And it would really make you feel good, huh?
It, you know, we always said we just always saw God on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
sure.
you'd never know what would touch a client's heart or mind, or what would change her mind. And, you know, we were often very surprised as to what that defining thing was, you know, and so we just, you know, saw God working.
Well, you know, it's amazing. I've been to some of the banquets, you know, for the fundraisers for the crisis pregnancy centers here in Las Vegas, and often a part of the presentation will be one of the women and one of the girls who's, volunteered to come up and tell her story,
Yeah.
accompanied by the baby. So it's really, it's a really touching moment. But they also have other parts of that story where, now, it's changed my life, and being a mom is, made me more responsible, and now I'm finishing school, and now I have a job, and now, a lot of different things came about because of the counseling that they got from a place like where you have worked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many resources in Las Vegas, like, and not just handouts, not, you know what I mean, like really a number of great organizations that really help people walk through these hard things in life and help them to get back into school or stay in school or, prepare for the workplace. We had a whole referral list, where I worked, that was just impressive to me as I got to know all these ministries and agencies and churches that just were there.
Well, that's really key, because one of the arguments that the pro-choice people make, pro-abortion people make, is, well, it's easy for you to say, you should have this baby, and you're going to walk away, you're not going to be any part of this. Who are you to say that this woman should have the baby? But that's really not true. I mean, there are maternity homes in this town. I didn't even know they existed. I thought that was a thing of the past. But no, there's a need for maternity homes, and they have them here. And there's people, providing, everything from diapers to bassinets to food to, you name it, for moms and their little babies. So I think that belies that argument. I think
It really
and
does.
it's across the nation. It's not just here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we're not saying that every problem is going to be solved and this woman's going to have a rosy life. There's, depending on the situation, there's, could be potentially major challenges. But I really believe when we trust God and choose what He would want, He created that child, that He will bless it. And He will take care of that child and that mom. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that all is perfect in her world, but we just see that over and over. I have seen some of our clients in, sometimes I would listen to them and I'd be like, man, I'm losing hope here. You know what I mean? Just hearing the situation that she's in, and then see her a year, 2 years later, and she's just beaming because her life is drastically different in great ways.
And people don't realize, men and women, that we're destroying, and there's no other way to put it really, we're destroying 1 million lives a year across this country, 40 million around the world. And when you consider, who they could have been, we say things like, well, one of those babies could have, discovered the cure for cancer. And there are real life stories like Steve Jobs. They had said that, his mother was a single mom, and it was recommended strongly to her that she have an abortion, and she didn't do it. And all he did was create the largest corporation in the world. That's a remarkable company. Others, Tim Tebow is another story that's fairly recent.
Right.
His mom was on a mission, in the Philippines. She got a disease, and the doctors there said, you better have an abortion because this child is going to be impaired. He just turned out to be a terrific athlete and not impaired at all, and a good Christian guy.
Right.
So there are many, many stories like that.
Exactly.
And that's a consideration that people don't normally make. The education system is a big part of this problem, schools. And it's a touchy issue, but let's touch on that too.
I know,
what the heck?
I'm the type of person, okay, I want everybody to agree with me, so you're really...
but there are things where we have to just stand up on our hind legs.
I know, it's good.
But in the schools, they're not allowed to talk about it, at least from that perspective. There's no discussion of Christ in the public schools, anyway, and where, what role, our Savior would play in a decision-making process like that. And then the sex education starts at a very young age, and it's basically all about contraceptives and, not about the beauty of sex and a married relationship and all of that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't know what stance to take other than that's wrong. You know, I wish there was a way that you were allowed to communicate in public schools more than I think you're allowed to communicate. Is there any opportunity to talk to kids about this before they start making these decisions, which is really what we're talking about here?
Right. You know, I haven't tried hard to get into the schools. I have spoken at church youth groups.
Yeah.
And, you know, my heart is for the youth because I feel like, you know, there have been so many consequences in my life because of, you know, sex before marriage, and I just want to, you know, share my testimony and talk about it, and you know, educate on abortion, let them see the fetal models. I mean, children are fascinated when they see those, and I think it sticks with them, those visuals. You know, you never know at what point that might make a difference. And yeah, I would love to do more. I did meet with a group of school nurses. This was when I first started working for the pregnancy center here, and it was a last minute. The person who was supposed to speak was ill, and I was very nervous. But I went in and started, you know, talking about what we did at the pregnancy center, and one of the nurses attacked me, you know, for being pro-life. And, you know, I said, look, we're there to help women make an informed decision. Yes, I would love for every woman to choose life, but God gives us all choices, you know, and so I'm just there to help and to help people know the love of God and that God has plans for every life, you know.
How'd that go over?
That didn't go over very well, and that woman, another woman, were just, you know, sitting at their seats like this, and
making
you know,
faces,
and just making faces, rolling eyes, and just very angry. And she said, so you said, you know, you educate on the 3 options. Do you refer for abortion? And I said, no. And she said, well, why not? You refer for adoption, right? And I said, yes. And, you know, she said, and you help people find resources to parent, right? You know, and so...
walking you down that path.
Right. And I said, I personally, in good conscience, could never refer for an abortion because a woman could die having an abortion. A woman could, you know, just have physical consequences.
Major surgery.
It's surgery, and you know, it takes quite a bit of force, that procedure. And you know, and I said, so, and I've just seen the aftermath. And so she said, well, strong women don't have issues after they have abortions. And so I was just praying, you know, quietly, Lord, help me here. And I said, okay, set all of this aside. I've personally had abortions. And I shared a little bit of my story and what it was like after. And I said it wasn't until, you know, like 11 years later that I even started to know that I was in pain because of what I had done. And then one of the other nurses said, you know what, my friend recently had an abortion and she's going through exactly what Karen just described. So I was like, thank you, Lord. You know, and so I think that changed the tone a little bit, but I'm not sure you know.
Well, people can't argue with, you know, I was lost and now I'm found. I mean, that's what it is. It's your story. They can't argue with your story, and I find that often to be, you know, the best way to witness to people anyway. You know, I'm not going to tell you how to live, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'll tell you how I was wrong,
right?
And I'll tell you where I'm coming out and who saved me. I mean, you know, and you can't really argue with that. So that's it's a great approach, and the Lord popped that one right into your brain, didn't He?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So where from here? What do you want to do now, Karen Silva?
That's a big question. You know, I feel like I've had all this, you know, experience in working at crisis pregnancy centers. I have this passion for, you know, helping people to know Jesus and to be able to choose life. I have this passion for helping youth to make the best choices and, you know, right choices, and so they can have the abundant life that God has planned for them. Because that's the thing, is I see the devastation when we don't walk in God's ways. He can't bless us.
Oh yeah.
You know, we hinder His blessing. And so I'm not sure, Dale. I'm praying about it, and I'm, you know, just looking for where God wants me next, where to use this passion and the ways He's gifted me.
Well, luckily we have one more segment. We're going to solve all your career problems in the next segment. We're going to do career counseling with Karen Silva coming up in a couple of minutes. We'll be back with her right after this. Hi, I'm Dale Davidson, host of Las Vegas Tonight. You know, radio has an enduring place in the heart of America. Sometimes it's music that can enliven your spirit or keep you company when you need some. More often for me, it's just been the right spoken word or two that can quiet my mind and soul. Radio brings me a reassuring word in the quiet of night or a welcoming voice early in the morning as I shake off the night's sleep and find my way into God's purpose for my day. And always, I find the best radio station is the one that brings me the best news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. My favorite radio station is KKVV in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's still right where it's been for years, at 1060 on the AM dial, hovering over Sin City like a gospel airship, broadcasting the good news of the abounding love that Jesus Christ has for every single one of us. No matter who you are or where you live, you can receive God's Word via the KKVV Gospel Airship. Just go to kkvv.com and click on Listen Live. KKVV is using all the tools that God's provided them, like podcasting and video streaming and video on demand, to produce programs that lift up our fellow believers and save the lost. If you feel a calling to speak to others about Jesus Christ on your very own show, pick up the phone and call the station. They'll be happy to tell you how. Call KKVV today at 702-731-5588 or drop them an email at kkvvradio@hotmail.com. Please join me in becoming part of the KKVV family. You'll be glad you did. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm here with Karen Silva. We've been talking primarily about pro-life issues. We're going to branch off and talk about some other things in a minute. But we're going to solve Karen Silva's career problems all now, and you're going to call in and offer her a job.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Dale.
Oh, you're very welcome. She's highly qualified. But you know, now that you're not doing that particular thing in pro-life, there's a lot of, you know, different areas of similar ministry. Are you attracted to some of those? You know, we were talking about the maternity homes and you know, the political aspects of you know, of the issue. There are you know, activist organizations to get involved with. What's your feelings about approaching it from that aspect?
You know, the biggest thing that I feel like is hanging in my heart is you have all these couples wanting children that can't have them.
Yes.
An adoption agency I talked to about 6 months ago had over 20 couples on their waiting list, just waiting for a child. And then you have these women who are in situations where they don't want their baby, feel like they can't care for it, whatever it is. And to me, I would love to somehow bridge that gap. You know what I mean? And help people to see, you know, a lot of women choose abortion because they feel like no one's going to have to know. You know, how am I going to carry a baby for 9 months? They feel like there's such shame in placing for adoption. To me, that's like the most courageous act.
Sure it is.
You know, carrying that life and placing it with people who can, you know, who are equipped to take care of that child. So again, I'd love to have an answer. I don't know, but I know that's in my heart. You know, to really
adoption or preparing both sides of that. You know, the parents to be and the woman who's going to have the baby.
And I think yes. Exactly.
No,
sorry. You know, and I feel like in churches and other organizations, you know, just helping people to learn how to talk to somebody in crisis, because I think often, you know, people just are people, and you know, when a woman might say, "I'm pregnant," you know, they get shamed. You know, people may not mean to, but you know, they suddenly are in a conversation where this pregnant woman is like, "Man, I wish I hadn't brought this up."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just teaching people, you know, how do you address someone in crisis? How do you help them to make better choices? How do you listen? Like, that's the most important thing, is to be a listening ear, because people will come to their own realizations if you know, listen and ask the right questions. You know, so that's a lot in my heart too. Is
how are pastors and churches doing in counseling women who are pregnant? Are they faced with that pretty often? Is that a common issue that comes up in counseling that a pastor would have to deal with?
I don't think it's real common, and really? I think a lot of it is, you know, I've met women who are in churches with pastors who would do anything to help them, but because the enemy, you know, likes to keep people in shame, they don't bring it up to their pastors or other people in churches. And there are some great churches who I think do very well with counseling, and then I think there are other churches that may not be their focus, or that may not be something that they've even talked about in their congregation, and maybe they could use some help learning how to do that. And it happened, you know, the last statistic I heard was, you know, 70% of abortions are, you know, people in church, you know, and of Christian denominations, and you know, so that's huge. And you know, it's interesting because in Boston I found like a lot of the pastors were like, it's not happening in our church, you know, and here I find it's very different, that people know that it is happening, but it's still, I think, pretty secretive.
Yeah, and if it's 70% of all abortions are by Christian women, is what you're saying, they have to talk about this. I mean, what issue touches more than 70% of the people? Life issue touches more than 70% of the people in your congregation. You know, I can understand the fear, you know, that they would have for, you know, bringing it up, but you know, I go to church and I don't hear much about it. Even on Sanctity of Life Sunday, you know, we have a baby bottle campaign. We'd like you to contribute, and here's so and so to tell you about that. I'll be sitting down here now, you know, and most pastors are men. That could be part of the issue. You know, they feel like awkward about talking about it, you know, for whatever reason. But it would seem to me to be a tremendous service, and have people on staff, you know, particularly you know, a high-ranking woman in the ministry who's an expert on that and can talk to, you know, to the female members. That would seem to me to be a really valuable thing to talk about in church. And you're right. I don't think they talk about it enough.
Right. I really don't either. And
Yeah.
I think it would help a lot, and to educate people on adoption, you know, and how it works. A lot of, you know, older people think about the way it used to be. You know, it was all secretive and a shaming thing, and you know, for younger people,
Send
they're
a
just
woman out of town, send a girl out of town, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
for younger women, they're just like, I could never do that. You know, I can't even tell anybody I'm pregnant. You know, all that stuff, and just educating people on how do you talk to a woman about adoption? How
Right.
do you know, help her to choose that option? Because 2% of women who come into crisis pregnancy centers choose adoption.
Is that right?
So that's very,
all?
that's it.
Wow.
You know, and that's sad. And I think part of it is we're afraid to talk about it, because often a client's first reaction is, no way, won't talk about that. But again, if you ask the right questions and find out what her fear ultimately is.
What is it
there's a lot
usually?
more
What are
hope.
they afraid of?
Having to tell people, you know, and that people are going to look at them and say, I can't believe you're pregnant, you can't take care of it, what are you thinking? You know what I mean? That whole shame
Yeah.
thing.
And then how could you give the baby up if you did have it? So that's why it's down to 2%.
Yeah. And then a lot of them are, you know, might be single and in bad relationships. So then if you're placing for adoption, you have to communicate and,
Yeah,
you know, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know, so it's,
Wow. You
It-
sure
it
you
is
want to get
hard.
involved in that system? But yeah, I think
I
that'd be a
do.
great ministry, you know,
I-
the
I-
adoption end of it or the preparation end of it, because boy, you know, that would serve everyone. You know, that's the thing. In other areas of children's issues, here in Las Vegas, there's been controversy over the shelter, you know, and the foster kids and the foster, you know, system. What do you think about what's going on there? Do you think that needs to be more tightly regulated? Do you think that's a heart issue once again? Is that a God issue? Are the wrong people, you know, volunteering to be foster parents? You know, there's a real need there. I mean, these kids are ending up in the children's shelter with no place to go.
right.
And then, you know, bad things are happening to them in foster homes. I mean, you know, I don't have any answers. I don't expect you to have the solution.
Oh, good.
But, you know, what do you
Yeah.
think about that?
You know, I do. I think it's a hard issue, and I do feel like there, you know, I know a little bit about the system. I have some friends who have a ministry that helps foster families, so I know a little bit
okay.
about it. I do feel like there does probably some changes in regulations would help, and
Right.
but you never really know what's going on in someone's home. You know what I mean? I don't feel like there's ever a way to really know, is this the best home for this child? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So again, it comes down to a heart issue, you know, helping people to deal with the stuff in their lives. Like women, I'll take it back to women who have had abortions, don't choose abortion because of something today. They got themselves in that situation because of issues that started back here years ago, and then decision, then
You
they
end
make
up
that.
here.
You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many people in this world carrying anger and hurt, and you know, they've been abused and all of that, and you know, to me it's a healing issue so that they don't perpetuate that, and you know, and yeah, and I don't have the answers, but I know many wonderful foster parents who
Oh,
take
sure,
in
so do
so
I.
many
Oh, yeah,
children, and
yeah.
you know,
Change
it's like,
their lives in a positive way.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know how to make sure that that's the experience all the time.
Yeah, and we're, you know, theoretically a compassionate society, you know, and we want to be, you know, particularly Christians. But you look upon, you know, what all of these things have in common that we've discussed is the ones who suffer the most are the innocent,
Right.
you know, the unborn children, the young children with no homes, you know, the orphans, if you will. And then you wonder, you know, how much have we progressed, you know, since you know, Dickens' time, since the 19th century, and you know, and orphans, you know, wandering the street, you know, that sort of thing. I hope we're better, you know, and I hope we want to be better.
Right.
But, you know, all of these things seem to be, you know, the innocent, the weak, those with no influence, you know, the poor, whatever. They're the ones who suffer the most. And then we look at them with a jaundiced eye. I guess it's easier to say, well, she, you know, had she not done this, she wouldn't be pregnant.
Right.
You know, so it's her problem to deal with today, you know, and they may not say it that way out loud, or maybe they do, you know. But, you know, that isn't really the issue. We're supposed to care for the widows and orphans, right? And
right.
that means all of these kids,
right.
you know, and the poor will always be with us, you know, as the Lord said, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there to help, you know.
There is, and it all comes down to love. You know, it really does. I think about, I had a messy life, and I hurt a lot of people in my life, and made some really bad choices, and thank God the consequences weren't nearly what they could have been. And a lot of, you know, it's amazing I'm alive today, but I had friends and family who have loved me, and that's what's brought me out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. There are many, you know, you and I talked about this earlier today before we rolled tape. We were having lunch and discussing life, and talking about the wonderful ministries here in Las Vegas. You've lived in other places and been in nonprofit ministry in other places and Christian ministry. How does Las Vegas compare, you know, to other major cities in terms of the number of what I call street level ministries? You know, those who are directly involved in things like crisis pregnancy or homelessness or, you know, foster care or, you know, drug addiction counseling or whatever it is. Does it seem about the same, or is it true that where sin abounds, grace abounds more, you know?
It's so true. Where sin abounds, grace abounds more. There's so much help here, and so many more ministries, and so much more help, and so many unique ministries. You know what I mean?
I know some of them. Yeah, it's really unique. Yeah, well, you know, we got hip hop ministries, and we got people giving away socks to homeless people. You know, we got all kinds of wonderful stuff that goes on. Arts-oriented ministries, you know, churches that are focusing on the downtrodden, and, you know, outreach to the homeless people and feeding homeless. I mean, this stuff is going on everywhere. That's part of what I really like about living in Las Vegas, that there are a bunch of people who really do care.
Right.
You know, which is news to the world sometimes. You know, it really is. But Las Vegas also has a big heart, which is a nice thing.
It is a nice thing.
Yeah.
It is.
And I'm glad you're here too.
Oh, thank you.
You know, we expect a lot out of you. So don't forget, see, she's got her email address underneath her name there. And, you know, as long as it's a job that takes place here in Las Vegas, we'll let her take it. Because we don't want to lose her. Your husband, Jim, we got to talk about Jim. How long you been married?
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
Yes.
He's a great guy.
He is.
And he's involved in a terrific ministry. Tell us a little bit about that and what it's like to be married to a hero like Jim Silva.
It's amazing. It's wonderful to have a man who has a heart for serving others and a heart for the gospel. And he's hasn't been feeling well lately, but before that he would go out every single Saturday by himself and hand out gospel tracts on the Strip.
Wow.
And help the homeless, and just would come home so excited and tell me how many tracts he had given out and how many, you know, conversations he had that were meaningful, and you know, sharing the gospel, or, you know, encouraging people who have walked away from the church, and all of that. It's amazing. And also he does a Bible study in a nursing home, and we do outreach at an assisted living center, and it's he's very gifted, and the ladies love him, and I think a little too much in those nursing homes. These older ladies, I keep teasing him, we got to watch out for that.
Jimmy's coming in today. Oh yeah, he's a sweet guy.
But he is.
Yeah, please tell him I said hi.
I will.
Yeah.
I will.
I want to thank Karen Silva for joining us today in Las Vegas tonight. It's been a fascinating conversation. Didn't I promise you? Thank you for
Thank
coming,
you.
Karen.
Thank you, Dale.
We'll be back with a final word right after this. It's been an honor to have Karen Silva on the Las Vegas Tonight show. She wanted to mention to you all that that address that's underneath her name, that email address, is for you to use regardless of whether you have questions or whether you have problems. Perhaps you're a woman facing a crisis pregnancy right now, and Karen would love to help you. So please contact her at any time. This, as we mentioned in the last segment, is one example of the wonderful people doing fantastic ministry here in Sin City. I'm Dale Davidson, and once again, let me remind you, please walk with Him.
Come on and shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with your host, Dale Davidson. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of our show. We so appreciate your loyalty to our program. To keep Las Vegas Tonight on the air, please go to our website, vegassaints.org, and click the Donate button. To send a check or money order, please make it out to Dale Wynn Davidson Ministries and mail it to 9030 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To suggest a guest to appear on the show or any other suggestions or questions, write to Dale at dalewdavidson@yahoo.com or call him at 702-480-3989.
Shine, Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century.
Ready to buy a home? Whether you want to move out of your parents' home for the first time, own a home after renting for years, or buy a place with a spouse or partner, purchasing your first home is a big step. Finding the right home for you and your family has never been easier. New American Funding can help you determine how much house you qualify for, what your payments may be, and get you pre-approved, which will help you put in a stronger offer when you do find your new home. Before you start the home buying process, it's important to consider everything that you want in a home and what that means to you. There are several things you should consider when buying a home. The neighborhood. Location, location, location. School district. Review what school district the house is in. Even if you don't have kids, having a home in a desirable school district will pay off when it comes time to sell your home in the future. Commute times. Check the routes to work, school, grocery stores, and more to see how busy they are and how much time these routes will take. Crime rate. Before you get too involved in the home buying process, check out the crime rates for the neighborhoods you are interested in. Our complete property profile report can give you property ownership, historical tax and mortgage data, neighborhood and school data, local market conditions, and more. Find the right home for you and your family with your complimentary property profile from New American Funding. To get pre-approved or to get your complimentary property profile, contact us today.
I can already feel you judging me, and not for what I've done in the past, but for what I'm about to do. I had what mattered, and I got careless. Like, I don't deserve more. I don't deserve sympathy. I don't deserve to be here.
Where the hell are you? Why aren't you answering your phone?
Jenna, what is the matter with you?
Someone once told me, you may not be everybody's cup of tea, but you're somebody's shot of whiskey.
Excuse me, ma'am. My car ran out of gas and I left my wallet at home. Could you please spare a couple dollars so I can refuel my vehicle?
I literally have nothing.
What's it gonna take to get you to join the program?
Get back, dog! If Jesus wanted you to have a dog, he would have blessed you with a ball and a leash now, wouldn't he?